And my king.
It's Michael Brown.
You can try to find Michael Brown.
Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job.
This is the Michael Brown Show.
Hold on tight to your dream. Yeah. Hold on tight.
Hey, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to the program. Christian's booted out of here, and Lori Lynn's come in. It's the Let's Eat segment. And
guess what
I have really nothing to say except
he's lost total control of the show.
I've lost total control of the program.
Between Angie and I, it was like, boom, you're on.
Between our guest earlier and now this. So I'm just going to tell or ask Lori Lynn. Actually, I'm going to tell Lori Lynn. Would you introduce our guest and would you casually mention the fact we have less than 24-hour-old baby goats over here on the floor?
The goats. We have goats in studio. Isn't that
Goats in the
awesome?
studio.
Baby goats. They were born yesterday, you said, at 7 p.m.?
A.M.
So they're a little over 24 years old.
24
hours.
24 years.
24 years old.
An old goat.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm the old goat in here. But
Well, you said it, not me.
you were thinking it. So what is...
Why, where, what did you do? What did you do?
What have you done to us tonight? What have you done to me?
I took a cheese making class, and I believe we talked about that on the air.
Yes, we talked about it. I laughed about it.
Yes, and you poked fun at me. Why are you making cheese?
Yes. When you can go to King Soopers or you can go to anywhere and you can buy cheese. But no, you had to make cheese.
But this is more fun. This is much more fun. I found The Art of Cheese on Facebook one day, just, going through, and it's like, hey, you want to do cheese making? I'm like, well, yeah. And so then I clicked on it, and it was in Longmont, and the school is called The Art of Cheese. So I took the day off and went and made cheese and met our guest, Kate Johnson.
You didn't actually take the day off. You just sneaked out of here.
No, I actually took the day off because I was asked to do something. I'm like, no, I'm going to go make cheese today.
All right. Okay. Well, Kate,
so off I went.
Kate, welcome to the program tonight. I've never had goats in the studio before.
Well, yes, you have.
There's a first for everything.
I've had some old goats. Actually, I've had some Jack you-know-what in the studio, but not young baby goats. So you're up in Longmont.
We are.
Now, do you have a farm, or are these backyard goats? I mean,
So
I don't know anything.
Well, that's what we're here to educate you about. So yeah, we have a little farm up in Longmont that we raise dairy goats, and that's how I started in cheese making because we had a couple of dairy goats that my kids were showing in the 4-H program.
Oh, okay, because I was going to ask, why did you have goats to begin with?
Yeah, well, we decided that it would be a fun 4-H project, and because my kids didn't want to raise a market animal that they'd have to sell at the end of fair to go off to be butchered, they were like, no, we want to keep them. So I said, well, how about dairy goats? Because not only do you get to keep them, you get more every year because you have to breed them, right? And so that's kind of how it started.
Wait. What do you mean you have to?
Well, you don't have to, but if you want milk. So it's a dairy animal, and it doesn't provide milk unless it's had babies.
Right.
And then you have babies, and then you breed those babies, and you have more babies, and that's what happens. So this is.
So how long will a mother goat lactate?
So
before you have to breed her again to.
Yeah, it depends a little on the breed, and it depends on the part of the country you live in. But we raise Nubian goats, and they have generally about a 9 or 10 month lactation cycle where they're really producing well, and then they'll still produce as long as you keep milking them. Yeah. It's kind of a supply and demand thing. Yeah. But they kind of drop off a little bit. We breed them while they're still in milk, and they're pregnant for 5 months, and the last 2 months we dry them off so that the babies are getting all the energy. And then the first few months, the babies get the milk. And then once the babies are weaned, I have milk. And that's how come I started making cheese.
All right. Before we get to the cheese, though, so you get the goats for a 4-H project for your daughters.
Right.
And they decide milk goats because you got a product.
Right.
Were you selling the milk, or do you sell the milk, or what?
So initially we didn't, because we just had one goat, and we had milk, and we'd have enough milk for our family, and then we'd make cheese from it, which is really why cheese is a thing, right? Because you have a lot of milk, and milk doesn't stay milk. It wants to be cheese. I mean, that's how you can preserve milk, basically, right? So that's how we started, was just for ourselves. Now that we have a bigger herd and we have a lot more milk, we do use a lot of the milk for our cheese making classes, so people get a chance to work with farm fresh milk, although we also work with grocery store cow's milk, because not everybody has access to farm fresh milk.
Right.
But and then we do sell milk in the fall when we when all the babies are weaned and we have excess milk, then we run a little milk CSA, which is how you can sell milk legally in Colorado.
Well, because I was going to ask,
Yeah.
because I know all the controversy about raw milk.
Exactly.
So is the same true for goat's milk?
It's true for any milk. The only way you can legally sell it if you're not a regulated dairy is through a raw milk CSA, community supported agriculture. We actually don't sell ours raw. We pasteurize it lightly, but it's still the same process. So it's called the herd share program. So people would buy into our herd.
They buy a share of the.
They buy a share of the herd, and then they get access to their half a goat's milk every week. Right. So that's kind of how it works. You can buy a half share or a full share, and then you get a certain amount of milk each week.
Yeah. Lori Lynn will tell you, because I'm always fascinated by the business side of all the
Yeah.
things she brings in. Is this financially self-sustaining?
Yeah.
Is this a hobby?
It's both.
I don't care. Let's pretend the IRS isn't listening.
Yeah.
So
No.
just tell me, is it really a hobby,
It's
or are you actually
both.
making some money on it?
So the farm is a separate business. So we have Briargate Farm is our farm, and that's the dairy goat operation. And I would say that breaks even. So by the time you factor in, we sell baby goats, we sell the milk, we get a tax break because now we have an agricultural designation. They pay for themselves. It's still at the hobby level. Like, we're not making money. The cheese making school is a separate business, and it actually is profitable. It's not like we're getting rich at this business, but it is an actual business. But I did it for years as a hobby first. And then I saw there was a lot of interest, and there was a big lack of really comprehensive cheese making in this area as far as education. There were a few places that did soft cheeses and a few places that did mozzarella, but there really wasn't a cheese making school here. Whereas, if you go to California or you go to New England, there's a lot of cheese education, or Wisconsin. But here in the Front Range, there just wasn't very much, and there was a lot of interest. We have a lot of foodie people around here, and a lot of people that really like cheese. and I just decided it was a void that I could fill. So we opened as a cheese making school in 2014. Officially, after I had been doing it as a hobby kind of on my farm for a number of years.
So you've been doing this, the cheese making school is now going on its 4th or 5th year.
Exactly.
For a small business, that's
pretty good.
That's not really, that's like really
I
good.
know, and
you're like to cross the hump.
I know, I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you also sold the goats. So I haven't really, as you know, since we first met, all my questions tonight have been stupid questions.
There is no stupid question. I'm an educator, right?
Oh, are you really?
Yes.
Do you teach?
So, teaching and training is my background.
Okay.
So, I often say the only thing I'm more passionate about than cheese or goats is teaching, because
Did you
that's
teach in
really.
Flat Brain or what?
So, no, I wasn't a school teacher. I was a trainer. I trained for some nonprofits, and then I actually have a degree in counseling, and I was a career development trainer.
Right, okay.
And then I was a life coach, and I did a lot of life coaching and training. And then
Maybe
this
you
was
can
my
help
newest
Lori Lynn
thing.
and I. Yeah. We really
We don't know about our
Well, I often joke I coached myself right out of coaching by
coaching,
following my own advice,
Right.
which was follow the energy, and the energy says.
Well, didn't you
Be a
start
cheesemaker.
teaching some of your classes at breweries, and that's how Haystack found you?
Yeah, so when I first started teaching, I didn't have a brick and mortar location. I would just go places with all my cheese making supplies, like I did here today, and I would teach wherever. So I would teach at the rec center, the senior center. I taught it at the Cheese Importers Cheese Shop, and I'd teach at breweries and wineries. And so Haystack kind of heard about me while I was doing that. And when they built their new creamery, which opened in 2015, they offered to have a dedicated space there that we could use for our cheese making school, and we call it their Cheese Education Center. And they use it during the days and for their tour groups, and then I use it mostly evenings and weekends.
All right, hang on.
Fascinating,
All
right? And
yeah,
you did all the stuff you never knew about cheese, but
I
we're
know.
afraid to ask.
And I have a feeling there's more to come too. So stay tuned. The Let's Eat segment will continue. We got I think that one of the goats actually pottied on the floor. Does anybody care?
Does anybody
I
listen
don't.
to this thing on?
We'll be right back.
What I like about you
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the Let's Eat segment.
Happy Cheese Day.
Happy Goat Day.
Happy goat, baby goat, and cheese
All right,
day.
both of you. You know what? I'm gonna waddle down the hallway and
But we have
take
baby
the goats for a walk.
We have baby goats in
and
the
you
studio.
can talk about the baby goats in the studio.
That makes me so happy that there are baby goats in here.
You're so pathetic.
I know I'm not pathetic. I just like goats.
I just can't believe how young they are. I mean, I find it fascinating that we have these somewhat 24-hour-old goats
right,
in the studio.
And you would think maybe they would be older, but they were standing and
Right.
Oh, yeah, they're up in the first 5 or 10 minutes when they're born. And these two were very strong and healthy. I wasn't sure I would bring the newest ones. We have some that are a little older, but the older ones get pretty rambunctious too. So the benefit of the babies is they're pretty sleepy. So, they just rode on their laps in the car on the way here. And
I would have wanted the rambunctious ones to climb up on the console. And
those are the
we'll
ones
do that next time.
stand in front of the camera.
Those
Hey,
are the-
so can we
those are
get
those yoga and goats.
So you brought two of your 4-H girls with you.
Yeah.
And I don't remember your names. I'm
So
so sorry.
Lily and Anna.
Lily and Anna. Can you pick up the goats and put them in front of Kate's camera so everybody can see
Where
those
is this
goats?
the camera right
Yeah,
here?
that's
Right.
the camera
Okay,
right there.
so bring them up here, girls.
and maybe they'll make
Some-
a little bleat sound.
Yes. So this is brother and sister. Here, bring them her in a little closer. This is Phoebe, and this is Phobos. And
Aren't
they're
they
named after
adorable?
moons. We have different themes for each generation in our goats, and their mother is the star generation. And these were her babies. Hold them up, okay? Just hold her out. Hold her.
And they
this
just
is-
finished eating
Yep,
too.
and they just had their bottles of their mother's milk. It was actually colostrum because that's what they're getting right now. Just hold her up. So yeah. So, there you go. Here.
All right, good night, everybody.
My heart just melted.
That's all I
Time to
needed
go.
right there.
Isn't
That's all
that
I needed.
great? We're going to have you hooked before this is over.
That's all I needed
You're going
right
to not
there.
be wondering why we brought baby goats anymore. 'Cause they're so cute. Yeah.
So does the breeding of goats follow like horses and dogs and everything else? They have a certain conformation standard, a
Oh, for
breed
sure.
standard, and everything else.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed the white spot in the ears. I assume that's a breed standard of some
No,
sort.
the coloring isn't really so much the standard, although there are some breeds that have a color. Nubians can come in any color. And when you start breeding, you have a dam and a sire, and we just happen to have a black and white dam and a black and white sire. So a lot of our herd is black and white, but Nubians come in all color patterns. But yes, you do have conformation. These are purebred Nubians, and there are 7 sanctioned pure breeds in the Dairy Goat Association. And these are the ones that have the long floppy ears, which is why I wanted them. I didn't know anything about their milk when we started with
You
Nubians.
just wanted the ears.
I did. I just thought they were so cute.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that Nubians also have really high butter fat and really sweet, mild tasting milk. And so it's really great for cheese making.
So they look like either basset hound ears or lop rabbit ears.
Yes, they do look
Yeah.
a little like bunny rabbits when they're babies. And I'm just a sucker for those long ears. What can I say?
You know you want some. You know you want some goats.
I've got a puppy at home right now. If I brought home a baby goat,
We have to bring home two. You
could
can't
plan,
have just one
you could
goat.
plan the funeral for like 4 days from now. If I brought home,
You can't
a
just
baby
have
goat.
one. You need two because they're herding animals and they
And-
have to
That's
be
right.
in a herd.
And I would like.
And
I
you
say,
start with 2, and then you have 4, and then you have 8, and then you have 16, and then your daughter goes to college and leaves you with all her goats.
And then you're
That's
here,
what happened.
and you end up here like telling us about how to make cheese.
How to make
'cause you're
cheese.
desperate to get rid of all the milk.
Well, it's not that I'm desperate to get rid of it. It's that I have now an excuse for keeping all these goats that I have fallen in love with, because now I have a business that supports the reason I have to have so many goats.
And what's interesting about the cheese she makes out of her goat milk is the Colby and the Gouda that I sampled at the class. You would never know. Because most people go, oh, I don't like goat cheese. You would never know that it was goat milk.
So when someone just says the generic term goat cheese, because I'm like Lori Lynn, goat cheese.
Yeah, and usually what they're referring to is chev or chevre, depending how you want to pronounce it, which is kind of the classic soft goat cheese. And
You girls
chev
don't have to
means
stand up if
goat.
you don't want to.
Yeah, you can sit back down if you
But
want.
you can if you want to, but you don't have to.
They're not shy.
Yeah. You do whatever. I guess I'm saying you can do whatever you want to do. Okay.
So these girls are in my 4-H club, and they are new to goats this year. They have now bought 6 goats from me. That's this fall. I mean, this
What
spring.
a racket.
Yes, it's
What
pretty
a
awesome.
racket.
So that's why they got the honor of bringing goats
Nice.
to the
Okay.
radio
All
station.
right.
Because
So back to the goat
Yes.
cheese because
Yes.
so you call it chev?
yeah, chev means goat in
Okay.
French. And so what I usually tell people is any milk will make cheese, but there are certain cheeses that are traditionally made from a certain milk, and then there are certain cheeses that you can only call that cheese if it's made from a certain milk. So chev is a good example of that. It means goat. So you could make a chev style cheese out of cow's milk, but it wouldn't be chev.
Right.
Right. So that's what people usually are thinking of when you hear goat cheese.
So you can. Lori Lynn mentioned Gouda and
Yeah, you can
something-
make
Colby.
any cheese out of goat milk.
Seriously.
And
it
that's-
tastes like the Gouda cheese I would go buy from.
Yeah, sometimes.
Better. I would say it tastes better.
Yeah,
Especially
sometimes
since it's
it'll be
homemade and
right. And sometimes it'll be a little different depending on the breed of goat because different breeds of goats have different tasting milks. And it also depends what the goat's eating, and it depends on the period of where they are in their lactation cycle. But Nubian goat milk, most people are really shocked when they taste even chev. It's so mild, and it lends itself well to using for all kinds of cheeses that. I think if I gave you some goat cheddar, you wouldn't say, "Oh, this tastes like goat cheddar." You'd be like, "Wow,
Right,
that's
yeah.
cheddar."
Yeah,
It
good
just
cheddar.
tastes
And
like
and I think you're right about and I keep forgetting, is it chev or chev?
chev or chevra.
Chev.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that for me with chev, it was that it's so rich and so soft that all that combination in my mouth was just I just didn't like it.
Well, we're just going to do a little thing to see
Okay.
if you like this one.
if you can taste
Now,
taste
if
the
you
difference.
don't, it's okay. But
Right,
I will tell you
right.
many times when people taste this homemade chev
Yeah.
that first of all, and I'll explain when I show you how to make it. It's not as pasty as some chev because we don't remove as much of the whey from ours. And then also because it's Nubian chev, it isn't as goaty.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people will say, I didn't think I liked chev,
Right.
but I love your chev.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We might convert
Yeah,
you yet
okay,
today.
all
But
right.
if not, it's okay. I can
Yeah,
live with that.
yeah.
I won't take it
Well, I'm
personally.
anxious to taste the others too.
Yeah.
So you want to talk for a minute about?
I will talk
'cause
for a minute.
I know. I'm flabbergasted.
I believe
get
when
word
he
in
said in,
edgewise.
he's like, "Oh, I think you need to lead this," and I was like, "Okay." If people are interested in contacting you, how do they get a hold of you?
So the best way to find us is on our website, which is theartofcheese.com. And that's where we have all our classes listed. And you can get descriptions of the classes and register right online for the classes. We usually teach 2 or 3 classes a week.
And you do this interesting thing also. If you take like 3 classes, you get a certain classification and so on.
Exactly. We have a certification program. So it's an in-house certification, but we have, if you take 3 classes, you become a bronze level artisan home cheesemaker and you get a certificate. And then if you take 6, you're silver level. If you take 9, you're gold level, and 12 or more, you're platinum level. So it's a kind of fun little, bragging rights.
Hang on.
Let's wait.
You went to school to learn, girl, things you never do before. And what 2 + 2 makes 4, now I'm gonna teach you all about love.
Hey, welcome back to the Let's Eat segment on a Happy Friday with goats in the studio.
Happy Goat Day.
Kate Johnson from the Art of Cheese is in the studio. The website is theartofcheese.com. And we're doing this because Lori Lynn
Has
wandered
spare
into
time.
has spare time and went to make her own cheese as opposed to and I'm pardon me, but I am just a smart aleck. But instead of just going to King Soopers or Safeway or Hold Paycheck or anywhere else and just walking in and buying the cheese and walking out, no, you had to go make it.
But don't you find it fascinating to know the origin of the food you're eating?
Well, I talked about this week about people don't understand anything about where hamburger comes from,
Correct.
or bacon or anything else.
Right.
So I talk about this constantly because I grew up in an ag community, so I get it, and I think people are losing that. So
They
yeah, I'm
are.
always fascinated by it. I just also recognize that it's so convenient. I mean, we live in the land of plenty.
But
and
you
I
know,
don't
when
need
there's
to
a zombie apocalypse, I'll be ready because I know how to make chocolate and cheese and bitters. So, you know, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, but I'll be ready too because I've got everything.
You've got the guns.
Yeah, I got the guns. I got
Well,
the
good.
guns and I got
I'll
all
trade
the
you
food
cheese
storage.
for guns.
And we'll talk about the trading of ammo for food at some point. Yes.
Okay. Kate, you have a Meet the Goats.
Yeah, so our 4-H club, I'm one of the co-leaders for Goats and Galore. No big surprise there. And I'm a superintendent for a goat show at the fair as well. But we do community service. That's part of the 4-H mission. And so tomorrow, in fact, at the Agricultural Heritage Museum up on Highway 66 in Longmont, is one of our community service days, and it's called Meet the Goats. And from 10:30 to 12:30, we will be there with goats for the public to come and meet.
Right off 60, just west
Yep,
of
Highway
what,
66.
just there. Okay.
Yep. And we do that 2 or 3 times a year with them. And we'll probably bring a couple milking does and let the public try milking a goat. And then we'll bring a lot of baby goats.
Well, see, now that would have made a good YouTube video there of me trying to milk a goat.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's
And
still
you could
time.
do it. Yeah.
Well, I think she needs to go through some of the steps on how to
Yes.
make cheese because she brought a whole.
Yeah, we've got kind of a little line
Kit.
of things here for us. So you want me just to tell you what I brought?
Sure, how you start. And you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier that you can just go to the store and get just off the shelf cow's milk.
Sure. For some cheeses, you know, a big part of our education in class is what milks will work best for that particular cheese. So for Chev, obviously, if you're going to make Chev, you really do want to use goat milk, or it isn't Chev because that's the nature of Chev. But you can actually buy store-bought goat's milk too. And the key thing is you don't want to buy ultra-pasteurized milk because ultra-pasteurized milks are pasteurized at such a high temperature that the milk's too damaged to make cheese. In fact, that's why they do it. They're damaging the milk so that it will stay milk. And so there are only a few brands of goat milk at grocery stores that aren't ultra-pasteurized. So you have to be careful about that. Am I allowed to tell them where they can get none?
Sure.
Okay, so Trader Joe's and Sprouts carries a brand called Summerhill Dairy Goat Milk that is not ultra pasteurized and it works great. And then also at some of the area farmers markets and at Lucky's Market, there's a local goat maker, a Colorado producer that comes up and brings milk called Mini Moos and Kids Too. So those are, that's a cute name.
That is a great
So
name.
those are 2 goat milks that you could buy from the grocery store if you didn't have a goat or you didn't have a friend with a goat or you didn't join a goat CSA. I, of course, don't have to buy goat milk because I have it right in my backyard. But anyway, that's the hardest thing about making Chev is getting good quality goat milk. Making Chev is the easiest thing in the world. So I've brought it at a couple different stages because Chev is about a 24-hour cheese, and it really represents that cheese making is more chemistry than it is cooking. Because while we've been talking, in fact, while I was sleeping last night, cheese was being made because it's happening in the pot, and it's science that's what's happening. And so this is a soft cheese that you don't do a lot with it. There's just some waiting time. And so there are basically 4 ingredients in this cheese, as there are in most cheeses. And there's milk, there's culture, which is a good bacteria we put in milk. There's rennet, which is an enzyme that coagulates milk, and salt. And that's it. It's pretty simple. So what we do is we take a little bit of goat's milk. I started with a half gallon here. Heat it up to about room temperature. It's not a real hot process. So 72 degrees. We sprinkle some culture on it, and I get culture from a cheesemaking supply house. I get mine from New England Cheesemaking Supply, which is an online provider of cultures. We sprinkle a little culture in that milk. We put the lid on. We go do something else for a couple hours. And during that 2 hours, what's happening is the lactose in the milk is getting converted to lactic acid by these cultures. The culture is just a good bacteria, right? And it's consuming lactose and converting it to lactic acid. So it's acidifying the milk. And after 2 hours, we add just a drop of rennet, which is an enzyme that coagulates milk. And then we put the lid on and go to bed and leave it for 12 hours.
Now, do you
And-
leave it out at room
Yep,
temperature?
just at room temperature. And when you come back after that 12 hours, you have this beautiful curd. I don't know, can they see this if I hold it up?
Yeah.
Is there a way to know if they can see it? Can you see that?
Yep.
She said
Yeah,
yes.
so there's a curd that just happened. Like all I did was sprinkle a little culture and put a drop of rennet in. And that curd is my cheese, and the liquid is the whey, right? So, but there's a lot of whey still in this curd. And, you know, Chev is a little drier than if you can see this, you can see that it's still pretty wet. So we then spoon this into some cheesecloth. And that's what I have here. This is just butter muslin, which is a real fine woven cheesecloth, so that we're not losing any of our curds. And then we're going to turn this little cheesecloth into a bag, and we're going to hang it somewhere. Usually I just hang it in a big pot. I tie it on the side of the pot, you know, on the handle, so that it can drip into the pot. And you're just going to let this drip now for about 12 hours. So the first 12 hours is, you know, the curd developing. And then the second 24 or 12 hours is letting the whey get removed from the curd. So you can see how there's a lot of whey dripping out of this curd. And it's just going to hang then for about 12 hours. And at the end of that time, this bag will look like this bag. Okay, just from gravity and evaporation. And this is our cheese. It's finished, except for our fourth ingredient, which is salt. And so we just unwrap this little bag. I don't know if they can see it down here or not. And now we have our Chev. And we put a little bit of salt in it because salt helps to bring out the flavor, but it's also a preservative. And you asked earlier, why don't you just buy your cheese? Well, one of the nice things is I now know exactly what's in this cheese. Yeah. And especially for me, I know even the animals that produced the milk for this cheese. I know they were treated well. I know I'm not giving them antibiotics. You know,
you can also adjust, for example, the amount of salt.
Exactly.
Taste and
exactly.
Everything.
And I'm not adding any other stabilizers. I'm only using a little bit of salt. And because of that, you know, I'm going to use this up usually within about 2 weeks is about the time that we have that this will stay fresh. This is a fresh cheese. And I'm just using some non-iodized sea salt here, which I just sprinkle on the cheese, and then I take a little fork and work that into the curd because the outer edge is going to be a little drier than the inner edge, and so this will make it a little more uniform. Now, this is our finished Chev, but one of the fun things about Chev, and we do this in our classes, we actually set up, we call it our cheese bar. Yeah, so here's what it looks like.
Yeah. So it kind of looks like cottage cheese.
Yeah, only it's thick. See, it's kind of thick and pasty. But we let people then flavor their Chev however they want. So we have all these different flavors, and you get to make a little custom log of Chev.
So real quickly,
it smells amazing in here.
The flavor, what kind of flavor?
Oh, we'll do that. Can we do that when we come back from the break? Or do I have time now? I'm going to do one with an herb salt.
Hold it, because that indicates to me that it's more than a two-word answer.
It is.
Okay, hang on. We're making cheese with goats in the studio.
So what else would we do on a Friday afternoon?
I have no idea.
Why not?
Hey, happy Friday. Welcome back to the Let's Eat segment.
It's cheese time.
It's cheese time. It's cheese time on the Let's Eat segment.
With goats.
With goats in the studio.
I'd like to mention one thing about the art of cheese real quick.
Yep.
If you take classes there, it's just not the soft cheeses. It's not the mozzarellas and the burratas and the chefs.
Exactly.
You know, I made Colby and Gouda when I took a class with her.
Mm-hmm.
So two quick questions, because this is a short segment.
Okay.
Before we end the show.
Oh, and this is the cheese that I wax, so that's
you
why I'm
and your
holding
cheese,
it.
Okay. So two quick questions. Flavoring, you said that they can add flavoring to it, so I'm curious what flavorings. And then if you were to take the same mixture that you just had, but you wanted to make Gouda, for example, what would you do differently?
Well, so it's basically the same.
Do the flavors first.
Okay, flavors first. So with a fresh cheese, this is a fresh cheese, there's no rules on flavors. Well, if you like it, you could add
green chili.
Yeah, I
There's
have
a
green chili,
chef. This is one I've rolled it into a log, and I've rolled it in some nice herb salt. That this is a product that's made locally as well. And so now this is an herbed chev. I'm going to let you taste that in a few minutes. I also brought along some honey, and I'm just going to mix up some chev with honey and turn it into this really yummy, sweet and soury, kind of tangy, delicious. but you could put pesto in it. We even make chocolate chèvre truffles in class, so it has
I think I'll
chocolate
take that
in it.
class
And it's
next.
kind of like a chocolate cheesecake, sort of. So you could put anything. You could put bacon in it if you wanted
Right.
to.
Okay.
But with some of the aged cheeses, you're a little more limited on what you can flavor
Right.
it with because it has to be able to age.
So you've done the basic mixture, but now you want to make Gouda instead of
Yeah,
chèvre.
so
What-
it's
what
going to
do
be a little different process and different amounts. And what I would say is most cheeses have those same basic ingredients: milk, culture, rennet, and salt. But how much of the ingredient you use and then what time, temperature, and techniques you use will turn it into a different cheese. So, for instance, we added just a drop of rennet in this. With Gouda, we might add half a teaspoon of rennet. And then we're going to cut that curd and we're going to stir it and we're going to heat it and then we're going to press it and then we're going to age it. So a lot more techniques that we're doing. And the more of those things we do, the harder and drier that cheese will become.
But what gives Gouda then the I mean, mozzarella has a particular flavor. Gouda has
Mm-hmm.
a flavor. What provides those flavors? I guess that's well, I can't get that through my head. What
Yeah, I
provides
know.
the
It
different
is
flavors?
one of those things. It's kind of the miracle of milk, is all I can say, is that it can turn into a lot of different flavors, primarily by how acidic you get it.
Okay.
So how much culture you add changes the acidity level,
right.
and that's a lot of where your flavor difference is. The milk itself, whether you're using goat milk or cow milk or sheep milk, those will change the flavor, but then also the techniques that you're using. So, for instance, in Colby, the class Lori Lynn took, we do something called washing the curd. And that's where, while the curd is cut and heated and in the whey, we remove some of that whey and we replace it with water. And that dilutes the acidity of that cheese. And that's why Colby is a very mild, kind of moist cheese because of that technique. So the flavor is coming from these techniques, basically, where we're bringing out different aspects of the milk through the chemistry, that's happening. But I would say the simple answer is kind of the acidity level. Yeah.
See, I just thought there was like some of a complicated process.
It is a complicated
else.
process,
More-
actually.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's very
yeah,
complicated.
the reactions are all complicated. I get all that, but I just
and
thought
the
there was-
steps get more complicated if you're making an aged cheese. Like
Right.
this is one of the simplest cheeses because it's quick, it's fresh, it's
You
very
can make
easy.
it before a
Okay,
dinner
so
party.
now the
Right.
Gouda you have is
It's
it-
aging right now.
Right. How long will you allow this to
What?
sit in the wax?
I probably have another 2 or 3 weeks before I can eat it.
Okay.
It's not going to kill you if you eat it now.
Right. It's
I
not
want to
gonna
get
develop-
it more
because the
tanginess.
flavor, so the aging process, cheese is a living thing. It's not like you make it and then it's done. It's continuing to evolve as it ages. So the microbiology and chemistry that's continuing to happen in Lori Lynn's little wedge of cheese or
My
wheel
wheel
of
of
cheese there
cheese.
will keep changing. That's why, really aged cheddar tastes different than a young cheddar, right?
We got to run. Kate from
theartofcheese.com.
theartofcheese.com. Sing it, Kate.